Thank you for joining us here on XY Spark. This is your boy Rolando, and we're so excited to be joined this evening with a very, very amazing human being, Jonathan McLernon. And believe it or not, Jonathan has decided to come and be a part of the XY Spark family. And we're going to be having a wonderful conversation this evening about how, as men, we can promote healthy masculinity and continue to empower each other as we work towards strengthening our community and our families. So, Jonathan, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thanks, Rolando. Really awesome to be here. Well, I live in a city called Red Deer, Alberta, Canada, and 39 years old. I've got one son, so I'm a father to a 4-month-old son. And I run kind of two businesses. One is a nutrition coaching business, and we focus a lot on behavioral psychology. So helping people to understand not just what to eat, but sort of why the behaviors occur around the food is that they eat. And then I also mentor young business owners as well. So really helping them. A lot of people have a good idea, but they don't really know how to get it off the ground. So in particular, I focus on young coaches who want to establish an online business presence. And so in all of these, I find myself in kind of a bit of a leadership or a mentorship role. And there are things that I'm quite passionate about.
Wow, congratulations on your 4-month-old, actually, because you're going to have a lot of fun, I can tell you. So good for you. So you said that you do a lot of mentoring and coaching and tell us some more about that. What does that entail?
Well, I think a lot of it really revolves around helping people to become more mindful and more aware of their behaviors. I would say, I think as we get into more and more of a technology-driven society, a more sedentary, less physically active society by nature, what we're finding is more and more of our behaviors are happening on autopilot. So what I might say is, it's my theory that the modern 21st century world that we live in is less physically stressful than ever before, but it's more mentally and emotionally stressful than ever before. And we're actually seeing this show up in patterns of behavior, even at a societal level. And in the case of the work that I primarily do, of course, around obesity and weight loss, and I myself have lost over 100 pounds and had to deal with my own sort of emotional relationship with myself and food. But we're seeing it because I think we live in the age of Google. We live in the age of instant information.
Mhm.
But what we're finding is there's this gap between information and implementation. How do we take what we know and bridge that gap between what we know and the behaviors that we do? So why I share that is because what I'm really looking to understand and try to help people understand when I work with them is how do we create awareness around our behaviors? Because when we see behaviors that are unhelpful, it's more than just you're a good person or you're a bad person. It's like, let's understand what's actually driving these behaviors, at whether that's at the emotional level, at the level of your belief, at the level of habit. And it's like when we can bring this into our conscious awareness, then we can start to create change. So I say awareness is the first step to change.
Wow, thank you. It's powerful that you mentioned awareness, Jonathan, because in my own way, I speak a lot about awareness. Being in the mental health field, I try to encourage men to not ignore the idea of awareness and how important that is. So, in your own work and on your own journey, you say, "Hey, I myself have lost 100 pounds." There are a lot of guys out there who they struggle, and that interferes with their ability really to be to be positive. It's a challenge for them, so they don't feel confident when it's to the dating scene.
Yeah,
They don't feel
yeah.
confident in the workplace, but still they struggle with balancing that diet and stuff, and it interferes with healthy masculinity.
100% it
Oh,
does.
which is what tell me.
Well, so here's something really interesting. We have a crisis of testosterone in our society, among other things. And I really do want to bring this back to mindset, but I wanted to share this little piece here as well. So we do have what we call a crisis of testosterone.
Hmm.
What's interesting is we would look at this and say a lot of the poor behavior we see among men, oh, that's
Mhm.
too much testosterone. That's boys being boys, or this or that. And I'm like,
Mhm.
actually, what it is we have a crisis of lower testosterone than ever before in the male population. And correspondingly, you actually see an increase in estrogen levels. And what this tends to, and again, I don't want to say that I have a whole bunch of studies to back up everything that I'm sharing here. A lot of this is observational stuff and really my own personal experience when I had extremely low testosterone levels as well. Um, it manifests as really poor behavior that's really driven by insecurity, a feeling of a lack of sense of masculinity, a lack of strength, a frustration. Um, and so it's interesting because we might think the solution to poor masculine behavior is we need less testosterone. I'm like, actually, surprisingly, we need more healthy testosterone levels in men because, and so I myself had to undergo hormone replacement therapy. And what's really fascinating is as I normalized, this is very different than what we might think about in terms of, say, bodybuilders injecting super physiologic levels of, no, this has nothing to do with that. This is
Mm,
just normalizing, bringing it into the normal range.
mm.
And the shift that happened when I normalized that, I all of a sudden started to feel like myself again. And it was huge. And it's not necessarily that I was behaving badly, but I understand why we do behave poorly. And this is one of the things that does drive our behaviors. Now, that also being said, I'm like, I feel like I should put a caveat in there. I'm not saying to everybody listening that the first thing you should do is go to your doctor and ask for replacement therapy. There are ways that you can actually increase your testosterone naturally, both through nutrition, through exercise, through quality sleep, and so on. But it is a bit of an uphill battle. So I just bring that piece in because I want people to realize that sometimes there's more to it than just you have a bad attitude or something like that. Sometimes there's things at the end, even at like say the endocrine level, that are taking place that are creating some of the poor patterns of behavior that we see among men. And that low testosterone can really manifest itself as insecurity, and then that insecurity starts to show up as behaviors to compensate. So we don't feel very masculine, we don't feel very strong. One of the things that body fat does, so I was morbidly obese. One of the things that body fat does is it produces an enzyme that will take what the testosterone we do have, and it will convert it to estrogen. That will now show up as body fat storage in the belly and man boobs. So, and then, pardon me, it becomes a bit of a virtuous, it's not virtuous, a vicious cycle. There's nothing virtuous about it. There's a vicious cycle where the more body fat you accumulate, the more estrogen you produce. And the more estrogen you produce, the more body fat you accumulate. It's this vicious cycle. And so it's not so, it's like trying to turn around a cruise ship or an aircraft carrier. It's not so easy to turn this thing around. It's not, because even, let's say, even if you were to increase your testosterone levels, it doesn't create an instant change. But again, I really want to keep on track here and just say part of understanding this is realizing there's some things that are driving our behavior at a physiological level that we might not fully understand.
Wow, man, that's so powerful. Man, Jonathan, you said so much there. I'm slowly allowing it to sink in, I'm taking on the form of quicksand now, and I'm just allowing that to slowly just sink into my being. But you said a crisis of testosterone, and the explanation, man, I've never heard it put across like that before. I see where you're saying, yeah, it could be this, it could be that. Man, tell us some more, man. I'm excited now. I'm excited.
Yeah, well, I would have never looked into this myself
Mhm.
if I wasn't going through this myself. And that's the interesting thing about when we encounter problems like this is that it very often when we start going into this, it's because we're experiencing a problem ourselves and we're not necessarily getting the answers. So
Mhm.
if you go to the doctor and the doctor will do a blood test for testosterone, let's say they would consider the normal range between 300 and 1200 nanograms per deciliter. 1200 is pretty high. The average would be more like around 700, between 700 and 800. That's the nanograms per deciliter measurement in your blood. But if you're at 300, your doctor is going to say you're okay. You're in the normal range. And I strongly disagree with that. To
Mm.
be in the bottom 5% of what's considered normal. And here's the other thing that's happened. Because the literature has changed. So normal testosterone levels, I think, probably used to be something more like between 500 and 1300 kind of thing. And now they've had to expand what's considered the normal range because of what they're seeing in the population. They haven't really said, no, we actually have a crisis. They just changed them. They just changed the scale in which we determine looks normal. And because of that, we're seeing men with extremely low testosterone levels, and like our grandfathers in, let's say, the 1950s or 60s, where they would have they would have had 2 times, 3 times as much testosterone as we did. You know, um,
Mm.
so we actually changed the medical definition or the medical range that we consider normal. And because of that, we have all these men walking around with lower testosterone levels that are not normal. And normal does not mean optimal. That's the other thing. To look at this and go, well, you're in the normal range. Yeah, that doesn't mean it's normal. That doesn't mean it's healthy. That doesn't mean it's optimal. That doesn't, because testosterone is not just the hormone of, say, masculine aggression. There's other really positive benefits it has in terms of, helping your body produce healthy red blood cells, which then helps, circulate oxygen throughout the body and so on. And of course, masculine strength is a really important piece to that as well. And then there's a mood piece to it as well. And then there's the sexual drive piece to that as well, and so on. So that there's so many functions, and so very often we have a tendency to want to take something like testosterone and try to oversimplify it. Oh, it's just for bodybuilders who want to build muscle, or it's just men being overly aggressive and acting like jerks and things like that. And it's like there's a much bigger piece to it. It's a crucial part to who we are as men.
Wow, wow, man, this is great, Jonathan. Man, thank you so much, buddy. I've got to start testing my testosterone now to see.
Yeah.
But what I love about what you said, though, Jonathan, is and this is what I'm hearing you're saying. We need to move away from the negative connotations that come with testosterone and recognize that there are so many other positive benefits that's helpful for us. And as we talk about health and masculinity, I hear you're saying, hey, your attitude, your self-esteem, all of those things sometimes are connected to not having the right level of testosterone.
Yeah.
But then you mentioned too about, hey, the body fat and stuff. The more body fat you gain, is the lower the man. That's so.
Because here's the other thing. We often put forward a stereotype towards women about their hormones. So women have a different hormonal cycle than men, and we're not going to get too sidetracked. But I just want to bring this piece in. So we'll often say like a woman's moody or hormonal, or on during her monthly cycle this happens or that happens and so on. And that's because there's four main hormones that drive a woman's cycle. There's four stages of her menstrual cycle. So we know, or we acknowledge, that the different hormone levels create shifts in mood and behavior in women. In particular, the terrifying PMS, or really what it is the estrogen levels in a woman drop dramatically, and because of that, she experiences low energy and so on. The things that she wouldn't choose, but it's what's happening physiologically in her body. So that shift in hormones creates a shift in mood, in behavior, in quality of sleep, and so on. Well, we have hormones too. and very often we don't talk about men's hormonal health.
Wait a minute, Jonathan, are you saying, Jonathan, I'm getting troublesome now. Are you saying that men actually have are men allowed to have hormones?
Yeah.
Okay.
And to be clear, like, men do require some estrogen. Like, it's not so like, and women require some testosterone. Like, but a woman's testosterone will be like 100 times or 1,000 times lower than what a man produces, right? But they still require some, and men still require some estrogen. It's necessary to help. In particular, the one thing that stands out for me is healthy joints. So if we were to take away all of your estrogen, essentially your joint lubrication would dry up. You would be walking around like an arthritic cripple or the Tin Man. So it's not that estrogen is 100% bad. And the balance also really matters. And that would be one of the other things to look out for. So let's say if you artificially increase your testosterone levels. So let's say through somehow testosterone supplementation, maybe through a medical provider. Your body may also increase estrogen to compensate, because it's trying to maintain a particular ratio. So, because sometimes you might be tempted to think, well, why don't I just jack up my testosterone levels? Get myself the shot or the cream or the gel or whatever, and just jack these levels up. Well, you might do that, but there's going to be some spillover effects. It's not quite so cut and dry and simple as that, because your body's going to respond to that. We might start to produce more estrogen. Now, if you were to take that testosterone supplementation away, all of a sudden now you're left with even higher levels of estrogen and even more tanking level. So it's something that should be done in consultation with a medical professional. And if your doctor isn't educated on this, you might want to look to another medical professional, because doctors, they're not experts in everything, and that's okay. We're not experts in everything either. So if I remember my doctor, he said to me, "Man, you know more about this than I do." And I said, "Yeah, because this directly affects me. And I've been researching this and studying this and trying to come up with answers." And, here's the one thing: we do have access to all the information that medical professionals do as well now in the age of the internet. But the downside is we don't necessarily have the professional lens to filter all of that information. So we want to be careful that we don't start thinking that because I read all this stuff on the internet that I'm smarter than my doctor. I'm not necessarily trying to say that, but I do have a scientific research background. I was formerly a nanotechnology researcher. I was involved in organic and inorganic chemistry and so on. So I already came into learning about this stuff, and so I just want to share that because I don't want people to think that, hey, I can just go start reading on the internet and be smarter than
Yeah.
a doctor. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is you do have to be your own best advocate, because our medical system as well, particularly let's say in Canada and the United States, our medical system is what we call a triage medical system. What that means is there's so many people with healthcare issues that are much further advanced than the average person, that when you go to your doctor and you say, I have this problem or that problem, they're not interested in you achieving optimal health. Why? Because they're busy trying to keep another patient alive. And so it's not really the fault of the doctors. We get frustrated when we say a doctor only has 5 minutes for me and so on. That's right, because doctors and our medical system is not set up to help you achieve optimal health. They're basically trying to prevent you from being sick. It's not that doctors don't care. They're some of the most compassionate human beings. They themselves are highly stressed and overworked. And I would not want to be a doctor. Could you imagine every single day you're seeing 40 to 50 people telling you all of their problems? That would
Mm-hmm.
be extremely difficult. So why I'm saying that is, so we have to be our own best advocates, and part of that responsibility means we do take the time to educate ourselves so we can go to a professional and we can ask qualified questions.
Wow, wow. I want to go back on something, as we talk about the hormones, and, say, hey, ladies get hormonal. Are you saying that sometimes the reason why as men we behave the way we do, could it be that it's because we are hormonal?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny because we've created this like a stereotype around it that like hormones are bad and women are moody and stuff. And I'm like, hey, men experience this just as much. It
Mhm,
shows up differently in our attitude and our behavior and our physiology,
mhm,
but very much we have an experience of this too. And
mhm,
so, I mean, and we're not even getting into the categories of like sort of how the mental health piece and how society and how our environment and our digital environment is shaping our mental health and also playing a role in that. But very much we do. So here's the other thing. We look at as like I think very often we're tempted to look at things like mental health like an on-off switch. You're either in good mental health or you have an illness. When in fact it's actually there's an entire spectrum here, and we will fall somewhere on there, just like someone's not like on their deathbed or as healthy as a newborn baby. We fall somewhere into a spectrum there. And so to treat it like it's a black and white issue, it's like it's not. And so, for example, I've dealt with anxiety and depression in my life. Um, I'm able to manage it through lifestyle, through nutrition, through stress management, and so on and such, that I don't require medication. I feel very fortunate in that regard. Um, but I understand that for some people, that isn't actually physiologically possible. That doesn't make them less, and particularly in the case of men, this does not make you like less of a man if this is something that you are experiencing, because it's not something that you choose. So one of the things that I remember I struggled so much with was feeling guilt around the struggles I had around my own personal mental health. And some of that was connected to this hormonal piece.
mhm,
So because I felt that like my struggle with depression and anxiety somehow diminished me as a man. And it's like, I did not choose that. Now, I had some behaviors, I had some beliefs. I'd also been through trauma. I suppose I should, put that one in there as well. I'd also been through trauma 10 years ago. So
mhm,
there were some other pieces that were obviously in play there. But I I tried to hide this, for example, from my wife for probably 8 months. And my wife's not stupid. She loves me. She knows me like better than any other human being on the planet. We've been together for now 16 years. She's this amazing woman. She's not dumb. She knew something was going on. Right. And so finally, when I opened up to her and I said, here's what's happening with me, in my head, I thought that she was going to think I was weak, that she was going to reject me. And I got the exact opposite response. She's like, of course I knew this was happening. She's like, I
mhm,
knew this was happening. I was just waiting for you to come and let me help you. We're in this together.
mhm,
And it was like this huge burden lifted off my shoulders. She didn't see me as less of a man. She's
mhm,
like, yeah, you're struggling. Let me help you. Let me be a part of this. I am a part of your life. And it was so like powerful. I get goosebumps thinking about it. Like, just
Wow.
the freedom to open up and finally say, yeah, these are the things I'm struggling with. I wish I wasn't, but I am. And you know what that meant? That meant that I could say, okay, here are the changes that I have to make in my lifestyle in order to try to support my having a healthier mental. I want to call it mental fitness, really, because often we talk about mental health. I'm like, we should talk about mental fitness too, because we can improve. We can improve our mental health. It isn't that I don't experience sometimes episodes of what we might call anxiety or depression, but my experience in is very different now than it was 3-4 years ago when I was experiencing sort of nightly panic episodes. And the spillover effect of, say, a panic episode or an anxiety episode is now your nervous system goes into a low energy state, and now you experience something that we might call depression.
Mhm.
And so now, I know I'm skipping over a lot of details in my experience. I understand
Oh,
that,
it's
but
okay, man. This is our space, Johnson. You know.
yeah. And so when I could explain to her, so here's the things that I need to do. So for example, I really needed to start prioritizing my sleep. So I was in this space, go back about 3-4 years ago. I was in this space where I was working, say, 14 hours a day. I was running a nutrition and supplement store, so a bricks and mortar style business, and I was in I could say a toxic business partnership with a male business partner who I didn't understand at the time. And here's some other like salacious details that, like, we might explore that at some point. But I was being emotionally manipulated by essentially a narcissist and a sociopath, but I didn't know that because I didn't know what that behavior looked like. I didn't know, but I was being preyed on. And so I was sitting here in a state of struggling mental health and sort of being taken advantage of. And I was working 14 hours a day. I was trying to train 2 hours a day in powerlifting. So it's like I was trying to create this compensatory behavior. I'm going to get as strong as possible. So I'm 6'1", 250. I'm a pretty big dude. And so I was trying to get and naturally I'm pretty strong. So I was like, I want to see how strong I can get. So I'd be training 2 hours a day, lifting heavy weights, listening to heavy metal, double scooping pre-workout, these extreme stimulants. Essentially what I was doing was I was like redlining my nervous system. It's like driving around with your engine at 15,000 RPM nonstop. Well, no wonder I started to experience these issues. My nervous system was like, I can't do this anymore. You can't keep redlining anymore. And
Mhm.
so a couple of things I had to do. One is I had to cut out caffeine. Now I was a caffeine junkie. Like,
Mhm.
so the what's considered sort of the healthy upper limit of caffeine intake in a day is something around, I think, between 200 and 400 milligrams, depending on the individual, which you can get in like a single Red Bull or a single Monster energy drink or, a medium coffee, depending on the roast. Now, don't get that. I was consuming upwards of 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams a day, like 4 to 6 times was considered the healthy dose. Well,
Mhm.
no, and caffeine's a nerve, so no wonder my nervous system was so overwhelmed. And then to the cherry on top is I was sleeping like 5 hours a night and thinking I was not working hard enough.
Mm.
I was driving myself into the ground, and I was getting so angry at myself.
Mhm.
Why won't I thought the only answer was to push my body harder, to
Mhm.
punish my body. You're
Mhm.
not doing, how can I not lose weight? I'm training so hard. I'm giving so much to this. I'm not getting the response. What is wrong with me? And I was getting so angry and so mad.
Mhm.
And it was like the first thing was actually to slow down, take my foot off the gas, stop redlining my nervous system. I had to actually cut out caffeine entirely. I walked around like a zombie for like 2 weeks straight, in and out of headaches and withdrawals, and because I had to stop caffeine. And
Mhm.
then I had to prioritize sleep. And then I had to start to assert myself in a business relationship where I was being pushed around and manipulated and emotionally taken advantage of. And I felt like the biggest jerk in the world. But I had to set boundaries, healthy boundaries, stand up for myself, stand up for my time. I had to stop going to the gym for 6 months, which is one of the, I love being active.
Mhm.
Because I would go to the gym and I would start lifting and I would trigger an anxiety episode. So my nervous system couldn't even handle the physical stress of lifting weights. It was a really, really challenging period of time in my life. But
Mhm.
I wouldn't be here now having this conversation if I hadn't had to dig myself out of that place there to get to here. And so I think, if I was to tie this all together, it's like if you find yourself struggling, first of all, you're far from alone. Second, the best thing you can do is go to a trusted person in your life and say, I need some help with this. I can't carry this burden alone. And three, recognize this does not diminish you as a man. This is not something that you choose. Nobody puts up their hand and says, hey, I'd like to be saddled with anxiety and depression just to challenge myself. Nobody says that. So to realize that it does not diminish you as a man to say, I need some help with this. It brings
Wow.
it strengthens us.
Wow, Jonathan, man, let me tell you, thank you so much. What I want to really reiterate, and our last guest, his story about making change he really reiterated, and I wanted to take the time here at X5 Spark to acknowledge those special, significant others who have provided that safe space for men to be human.
Yeah,
You know,
that
that's so powerful because he's saying, no, Orlando, I went to her and she didn't judge me. She didn't look at me as seeing me as weak. She didn't, she said, hey, I know I'm here to help you. So kudos to her and kudos to all those other ladies because I'm going to tell you, Jonathan, um, that sometimes is one of the reasons why a lot more men are not asking for help
yeah,
because their partners have this outdated idea of what healthy masculinity is. And if they dare share that with their partners, they lose the respect of their partners in the relationship because hey, you're not a man, you're soft, you're weak. You know?
yeah,
So kudos to all those ladies out there who are supporting men
100%.
to and allow them to be human.
Yeah, there's something just amazing about it, and like I consider myself extremely lucky. For a while there, my wife used to tease me, and she'd call me the Tin Man. And this was because, so when she first met me, of course, we had the usual sort of falling in love story. We had a pretty cool story. Like, she's from Australia. It was kind of a setup that she was visiting Canada and so on. And some friends dumped her in my lap for a day, and I flirted with her like crazy because she still is cute. So, um, but she flew back to Australia, and I thought I'd never see her again. But two and a half years later, after this is going back to the days of like MSN Messenger and early two
Yeah.
thousands,
Wow, yeah.
and she came back to Canada, and she flew into Vancouver Airport, and she said, "I'll wear something that you'll be able to spot who I am," because it was in July, so it was actually almost 16 years ago today.
Oh
Flew into
wow.
Vancouver Airport. Yeah, it was
Wow,
it was
wow,
it
yeah.
was. She said, "I'll wear something that you'll be able to spot me." And so July in Vancouver Airport, like insane, like one of the busiest days of the year, and I look up and I see this girl wearing a Tigger costume bouncing along behind her trolley. And of course I knew right away that was her.
Yeah,
Like, yeah. So and that was really fitting because I mean she's a very energetic and positive and bubbly kind of person, and so that was kind of one of her nicknames was Tigger,
yeah,
and to this day my parents still call her Tigger. um,
yeah.
so that was, and so she jumped into my arms, and everybody cheered, and it was kind of like this movie moment. It was really, really cool.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a backstory, but I was also in the Navy, so I spent 6 years in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
To just shift gears a little bit to kind of give you some, that was just a bit of a backstory.
Mm-hmm.
um, the military is very much about service before self. And there is a really good aspect of it. There's an aspect to developing discipline, to developing resilience, to cultivating strength, and so on. There's some real value to that. But there's an element of it that can go the wrong way for somebody like myself who really struggled with my relationship with myself,
Mm-hmm.
who saw myself as less than. It's like I had this story in my head that I am less than, I am not good enough, I will never be good enough. So go ahead and use me as cannon fodder kind of thing,
Yeah.
almost. And so military, on the one hand, was really, really positive in that regard, but it also sort of reinforced this idea that I'd already been carrying around about myself, that somehow I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not, and so on. And so from the time that I was a kid, I used to have temper tantrums as a kid. And looking back now, I realize what it was is I've always been an empath, and being an empath and being like a large, like I look masculine. I'm like 6'1", 250. I'm not a small dude.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also an empath with a really gentle, caring heart, a loving heart for people.
Mm-hmm.
But as a kid, I'd have these big emotions and I didn't know what to do with them. And so it would come out as a temper tantrum because I didn't have the skills or I didn't know. All I knew I was just feeling these huge things in my body, and it
Mm-hmm.
had to come out somehow. So I learned how to suppress that because that was seen as weakness. I would have been bullied and made fun of and so on. I used to get into a lot of fights as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and after the fight, and I was already a pretty big, strong kid, and so generally speaking, I didn't lose very many fights. And this is back in the day when once the kid was down, we got up, okay, fights done and dusted, whatever, you know. But I would go home and I would cry. Go to a fight with a kid, and I go home and cry
Mm-hmm.
because I felt bad for hurting him.
Mm-hmm.
So, but somehow along the way, I learned that having these sorts of feelings wasn't good, that it was somehow made me weak and so on. So I learned how to suppress and hide these, but I couldn't always suppress and hide them. That's the thing. Sometimes it would slip out and people would see that, okay, no, he's actually got a soft heart. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so on my wedding day, for example, I tried to say my vows and I couldn't keep it in anymore. I just started crying.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was actually a really beautiful moment. But then I slipped back into being the Tin Man. So suppressing these emotions, don't let people see them, because if they see that you have this really caring heart for other people, they'll see you as weak. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't really know where this idea came from. You know, my parents are wonderful. They're loving. They're 42 years married. They're beautiful marriage. Like, they're amazing. And so I don't really know where this idea came from, honestly. And maybe we'll never be able to pinpoint it. But the reason that she'd call me the Tin Man is because I would hide a lot of my feelings, but she would know that I was hiding them.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that she couldn't see them, but human beings are more intuitive than we give ourselves credit for. We can feel something that we can't measure or touch. And so she could tell that I was hiding these emotions. There was no secrets with her.
Yeah.
And so, but she would call me the Tin Man. But
Yeah.
she'd sometimes say things like, "I know you're in there."
Uh,
And this is why, because we've had like a pretty good marriage all in all. We have really good chemistry together. We're a really, really good match. But that's not to say we haven't had our ups and downs.
mm-hmm.
And there were times that in sort of my lowest state, you know, particularly post trauma, like traumas are really like nothing prepares you for it. In my post trauma state, and maybe I'll just quickly say my trauma was essentially I was nearly beaten to death when I was living in South Africa. Um, four men attacked me, and so in my post trauma state, you know, it really exacerbated things like my depression, my feeling of worthlessness, my feeling of powerlessness, and so on. That I would say you should just go back to Australia. Like, you can find better than me. And I would literally try to, not physically, I never physically, but verbally and emotionally, I would try to push her away, not because I didn't love her, but because I had so little love for myself that I felt like she deserved better, and she deserved better than me, and she should go and find that in a different relationship. That was the place I'd gotten to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, wow. Listen, let me tell you, believe it or not, I'm listening to your story, Jonathan, and it's such a powerful story. So, how did you shift that? What changed? How did you shift?
It wasn't an overnight shift. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'll share just a little bit. So living in South Africa, because South Africa is a country that's fraught with like racial tensions, and so it was four black gentlemen that tried to beat me to death, and it had nothing to do with me, but it had to do with like I was kind of a representation of something that they feel had oppressed them. They didn't know that I was from Canada. They didn't know I was working for a nonprofit NGO helping underprivileged youth and things like that. All they saw was I was a representation of something that they felt had historically oppressed them. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the rest of the, that could be up to debate. So, anyways, their response, it was to attack me and beat me and rob me. So the reason they do it that way, they could have shot me, they could have stabbed me, but they wanted to demonstrate power over me. And so their choice of action was to try to beat me to death, to extend the suffering, to make it take longer, to make sure that they had left their imprint on me, to make sure that they had shown me their power over me. Now, ironically, that might have been my saving grace. The fact that that was how they were trying to, I don't want to dive into the details of that. I know people will probably be curious, but I want to dive into the details of that part of it. But just to understand the thinking behind it. So why that's important is because obviously after that happened to me, it was like they took something away from me. They took my power away. They jumped me at night 4-on-1. But nonetheless, so it felt like the most unjust thing to happen to me. Why would anybody do this to me? Here I am in this country, working for a non-government organization, nonprofit, helping underprivileged youth, trying to help them find employment, help them improve their life skills, and so on. Just the most like an altruist, like we were getting paid a pittance. We were just getting paid enough to pay the rent and buy food, and to have that happen. So it's very emasculating, could we say, to have to be attacked and to your weaknesses exposed like that in such an unjust fashion, and to feel powerless. I remember screaming for help and nobody was hearing me, and so there's elements of it that. So the spillover effect of that was there was a lot of rage, a lot of anger. As I was trying to process what had happened to me, because of the unjustness, it didn't even feel fair. I was like, at least if it had just been like one person, it might have felt somewhat fair. So trying to process all of the rage, and a part of my brain knew that this wasn't me and it wasn't right, but it was there. And so I really, really struggled with this. So I grew up in Canada, and I'd like to say, like, Canada is not perfect, but we're pretty open minded here, and we're pretty diverse by and large. So this really conflicted with my sense of identity. So here I was, somebody who thought I was pretty open minded. One of my best friends is Haitian, and I was feeling this rage towards groups of black men in particular because that was who had attacked me. But in my head, the logical part of my brain, I go, this isn't right because this is not who I am. So there's this real tension between my sense of identity and this emotional sort of primal thing that was coming out. And and part of this is probably PTSD, And in my head, I was like, because we stayed in South Africa for another 4 months, and there were other incidents that happened, and and South Africa is such a beautiful country, and it's not like all the people are bad. Believe me, there's so many beautiful, wonderful people there. That's part of the reason why we stayed, is because this happened to us, and we thought, man, we have the option of leaving. These people don't have the option of leaving. This is what they face every day. And it's not just a white black thing. It happens in the black culture as well, because there's many different ethnic groups within South Africa. And again, I don't want to toot on the rabbit hole, but all of this was for me to understand. First of all, I didn't want to be angry anymore. It's so draining. It was poisoning to my soul. And so I just remember saying to my wife, I'm like, I'm just so tired of being angry. It's not who I am. And I had to start the process of trying to forgive these men. I never saw them again. They actually murdered a man the night before. They didn't successfully. Thankfully, I'm like big enough, young enough, strong enough at the time that I was able to fight my way to my feet and break free. And we were held hostage in a building for a period of time and so on. Like there's more to the story, but I don't want that to be the focus of this. So I had to start the process of forgiveness. How do you forgive somebody who not only violently assaulted you, wanted to kill you, and would do it again if they had a chance? That's a really challenging thing. And so I had to go back and I had to ask this question because I wanted to forgive them, because I wanted to be free. I
Mm-hmm.
understand that forgiveness is not about absolving them of their behavior. It's about setting myself free in this experience. So I had to ask this question: what happens in a man's life that they get to the place in their existence where they feel that the appropriate course of action to right something wrong is to kill another human being? How did they get there? So when I started to ask and try to understand that question and say, even though their behavior was horribly wrong, there's a reason why it occurred, and had nothing to do with me. It wasn't nothing to do with Jonathan. My ego wanted to make it about me, the special human being, the one and only me on this planet. It had nothing to do with me. It was all about them and their experience. So something had happened to them to get them to this place. Now, I don't know whatever happened to them. This was 10 years ago now, so I have no idea. I know that 3 of them went to jail. The 4th one they didn't find. Maybe. Who knows? But people who live a very violent lifestyle are very likely at some point in time to probably meet a violent end. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it began the process of forgiveness. And to make the decision to forgive didn't mean that tomorrow everything was all right. But every time it came up, I had to take a step back, sit down and breathe. Every time the rage came up, and just say, I want to forgive these men because I want to be free. And if I'm going to forgive these men, I need to understand at least a part of why they did this. And this to me is the heart of what compassion actually is. So very often we might think of compassion as a get out of jail free card. It's like, no, it's not. But it's understanding the humanity in the behavior. It's understanding that, in an entirely different lifetime, I could have met those men and we could have had a meal together and just had a beautiful experience of common humanity connecting. But because of their life experience, something led them to that place. So that because that was the first step, was really learning, like going through the process of forgiveness. And then I went through some trauma counseling. So why that was so helpful, like, and I was really resistant to it because, we men, we want to say, I'm strong, I can deal with this, I can handle this, I can push this down, and so on. But I had to start, like what the trauma counselor was able to explain is my behavior. Because again, I felt this huge amount of internal tension and conflict. Why do I feel angry? Why do I want to inflict hurt on other people? That's in such conflict with my sense of identity, where I just want to hug everybody. Like, I have this huge heart of love, and so she was able to explain what was happening in my brain, and that I was able to start making peace, because I was like, okay, because I didn't want this anger in me, but I didn't know how to make it go away. And so and this is why I talk about mindfulness and awareness, becoming aware of, this is why this is happening. This is not because I'm a bad person. because I felt so guilty for even having these angry feelings and rage, like, because there's that part of your brain that goes, this doesn't make sense. This is not me. And so I felt so guilty about it. So for her to explain that, I realized, okay, this doesn't mean that I'm a horrible human being. It means I'm a traumatized human being. That's why I'm having these feelings and emotions. And so that gave me the space to process them, because I feel like we have to metabolize this experience. We can't keep it in. It has to come out. It
Mhm.
has to, somewhere in a safe space, it needs to come out. In because and when I talk about a safe space, I think real human transformation can only happen in a place where we feel safe being vulnerable. And this is relevant in any kind of coaching that I do as well, in the work that I do. We have to create a space, because if we try to solve this ourselves, you can't. Because we human beings, we're kind of like herd animals or tribal creatures. We thrive on human connection. So to be alone historically meant you were at risk of death. To form community and tribe meant that there was safety. And so we need that external human connection where somebody holds a safe space for us, a space where we can be vulnerable, expose our weaknesses, expose our struggles, wrestle with our demons in the light, and then we can process them and we can move past them. But until somebody holds that space for you, it's almost impossible to do. You can't do this by yourself.
Wow. Jonathan, man, let me tell you, thank you so much, man. And I'm glad to hear that your story, happened in South Africa. I'm glad to hear that it worked out well for you. You know, and what you just said is really the platform upon which XY Spark stands to provide that safe space for men like you and other men to come in that safe space and know that this is a place where you can come and be vulnerable and work through your trauma, work through your grief. And that's why I do what I do, Jonathan. As a
Yeah.
psychotherapist now almost a decade, I see the need to provide this space for more men. And that's why I'm really excited. And I'm so glad that you came and shared your story. And I'm hoping that all our listeners will take some nuggets from what you said and open themselves up. Try to find a safe space. It's okay to be vulnerable so that the healing can happen, the forgiveness. Jonathan, man, it looks like I'm going to have to invite you to come back again because, man, this is so rich, man. We've got to have a part two of this conversation for sure, man.
Oh, if you didn't say that, I was going to say that.
Yeah.
And I really want to say thank you for holding this space as well. People might ask, well, why do I share my story? And it's because I want to help other people.
Mhm.
This is how we help other people, when we realize we are not alone in this struggle.
Mhm.
And so it's you holding this space is so incredibly powerful. I love the work that you do, and I can't wait to come on and chat with you again. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jonathan, for being here. And folks, as usual, this is your boy, Rolando. We had Jonathan McLernon here. He shared his story. Please subscribe, like, share this with other men.